Hello, School Transportation Nation. We're here live in Frisco, Texas at the TSD Conference. Excited to be bringing you this podcast. It's brought to you by TransFinder, the leader in school bus routing. And I also have our other sponsor with us, First Student, and I have Gregg Prettyman we're going to be talking with in just a short second. They made a big announcement here at the TSD Conference today, and we're going to learn more about FirstAlt. So also got Mr. Ryan Gray with me, the master of ceremonies. I call him like he's like a cat herder trying to pull all the speakers together, make sure everybody shows up, does their job. We got a packed house, Ryan. People are excited for the classes, I think.
Absolutely. Great turnout today. The first full day breakouts of TSD Conference. So it's great to be back and see everyone here. Really, impressed with the turnout. I don't know. I think you are too, Tony. It's great to see everybody. So much of the conversation is about the driver shortage and continues to be. Obviously there's so many pressures right now, and it's a great segue. We're going to talk to Gregg Prettyman, like you mentioned a little bit about their new launch with a lot of different services now that are available to student transporters. A lot of the conversation again is this industry wants to get every kid on the school bus, but it's just not possible. So obviously everyone's dealing with this. Everyone's dealing with the driver shortage. So it's great to see everybody is mobilized. They're here. They're ready to learn. They want to, walk away, have some solutions they can take back to their district or their bus company to try to address all of these pressures that they're facing right now.
Yeah, Ryan, one of the big things that I see out there, we saw Dr. Steven Soroka, who is kind of the power of one, right? Making sure you can make a difference, one person. And, one of the things that was really pointed to me, he took $100 bill. He basically asked the audience, are you having a bad day? And, people were a little reluctant. A couple people threw their hand up. He pulled a lady up on stage and she's like, oh God, you're really doing, my day just got worse all of a sudden. And he's just talked to her. He said, hey, here's $100 bill. Do you want it? She's like, yeah. He crumples it up. Then he throws it on the ground. Then he stomps on it. He said, is that $100 bill worth less now? No. You're worth a lot. You're valued. Your contribution is valued. So I thought, it was emotional. It made an impact on the audience. It was really interesting. So I love seeing stuff like that that's impactful and moving to the audience. And it just brings another level of kind of emotional connection that people have, because it's people that make this industry work and can't do it without them. So always exciting. Before we dive a little deeper into the conversation with Mr. Gregg Prettyman, here's a message from TransFinder about their quartet. That's 4 solutions that keep your team singing from the same songbook to bring the music to your ears. That's Route Finder plus the lightning fast browser-based solution that creates the safest, most efficient routes and bus stops. Stop Finder, the industry-leading parent app that shows students where they are in real time. Wayfinder, the driver app for drivers and substitutes, and Viewfinder, which allows authorized users to monitor your entire operation. These award-winning solutions work in harmony, so everyone has the district's needs covered. You can email them at getplus@transfinder.com at 800-373-3609 and tell them you heard about the quartet on the STN podcast. You'll be singing in no time. All right. So to the stage, I would like to bring forward Mr. Gregg Prettyman. Gregg and I have known each other for 13 years back in the day, and he's been in the alternative student transportation biz. So he's like the godfather of alternative transportation. So I think, that shtick is, it might carry through. What do you think, Gregg?
It might. I've been called worse things.
Excellent. So you guys made a huge announcement at the opening keynote today at the TSD conference, FirstAlt. So what is FirstAlt?
Yeah, so FirstAlt is First Student's alternative transportation solution. So, First Student, the largest bus company in the country, and obviously the yellow bus, the most efficient, safest way to transport students to and from school. But First Student had a lot of their customers reaching out to them and saying, hey, listen, we have some students out of district. We have students going to special needs schools. And in the past, First Student or other bus companies would have to reach out, or the districts would, to a third party to handle alternative transportation. So really no one company was doing both things. So with the launch of FirstAlt, First Student now has a complete K through 12 transportation solution. Whether you need a Type A bus, Type C bus, a white van for your fleet, or alternative transportation, First Student can now handle the entire spectrum of student needs.
Now, I know before First Student had a van service.
Right.
So how does that necessarily differentiate from what you had previously?
Yeah, so with the van service, you're still having to own the asset. You still have to hire a full-time driver. And so van service is nice, and a lot of districts still want that, but it still really ties into the transportation problem of not having enough drivers in the industry. So alternative transportation is unique in that you're actually going out there and finding existing resources, companies who are already in the business in that city or in that county and running maybe non-emergency medical trips or maybe airport shuttle, and you're just kind of adding them an extra book of business to their daily routine.
Yeah, and in your presentation, we noticed that you talked about and you were impressed by the First Student training regimen that they go through. Can you explain a little bit kind of what that is and kind of what that means for alternative transportation?
Yeah, I'd love to. That was probably my most exciting thing to discover when I first started with First Student. They have a training program for all of their drivers. And it started out with just for their drivers who were transporting students who had special needs. And then they realized, man, every driver really needs this training, regardless. They're all transporting students, right? And at some point, every student has behavioral issues on the bus. And so they really rolled that out across all of their bus drivers. As I mentioned in the presentation, they transport 1 million trips a day involve students with special transportation needs. So they really drew on their own experience with all that, kind of practical experience they had. Then they pulled in the Children's Hospital of Cincinnati and several other different behavioral specialists. And they said, hey, let's put together a program with our knowledge that we've gained, over the years transporting these students, with your knowledge as behavioral specialist. So when I saw that, I really felt like, man, this is kind of the unicorn of transportation that we'd always been looking for. In previous experience with alternative transportation, trying to find something off the shelf or a third-party training program was just always difficult and really didn't, it was nice, but it really didn't check all the boxes. So when I saw this with First Student, I was like, listen, if we can implement this across all of our drivers, regardless if they're alternative or buses, now we can offer districts the same level of training no matter what vehicle is pulling up to pick up that student.
That comes down to, because we see so many of these companies jumping into this space because of the need, right? There's the demand, there's all these folks. And this is nothing new, right? This goes back 15, 20 years where the elephant in the room was school buses can't always be used. Right. And we've just seen that grow exponentially. Is what you're describing with First Student's model, is that what you're looking to really set yourself apart in this ever increasingly crowded space?
Yeah, really, as kind of Tony was mentioning, some people would kind of jokingly call me the godfather of alternative transportation. And when we launched alternative transportation about 13 or 14 years ago, it was kind of hearsay to say, hey, we're going to transport a student in a vehicle that's not a bus. I've stood in auditoriums in Dallas, Texas, in a high school auditorium. I had 200 people chanting at me, "We want the yellow bus! We want the yellow bus!" because they had used us to provide alternative transportation. They'd done a poor job of communicating to the parents, and so it was a big surprise to them. After about 4 or 5 months, when they tried to move students back onto the yellow bus, we got the same chant, "We're not going back to the yellow bus." And it was just because they had specific students with specific needs. And sometimes they were being routed an hour and a half to make the bus ride efficient. And so when you find those kind of edge cases, and that's really what we're talking about in alternative transportation. We're not talking about the general population where you're putting 50 or 60 students on a bus. We're talking about for a district, maybe 50 to 150 students out of, the tens of thousands that might be in that district. And so that's why it's so specialized. But to your point, Ryan, we just always struggled with how do we get it off the shelf training? And as you know, in student transportation, there's nothing off the shelf about it, right? It's very compartmentalized, very specific. And so, so when I saw this with First Student, I was like, oh man, this is, I think, what will set us apart in this industry is whether, like I said, whether that bus driver picks you up or whether an alternative driver picks you up, you can be assured that they have the same level of training with regards to student needs.
So earlier today, we had a session actually on managing risks in all environments of school transportation, student transportation, not simply looking at, the influx of all the transportation network companies or the alternative transportation companies, looking at certainly the school bus, but white fleet that's operated by school districts. There's plenty of that around. We're seeing more parents, especially under IEPs that are being reimbursed today more than ever before, when schools, for whatever reason, the driver shortage can't fulfill that. You were mentioning the training aspect, right? And utilizing First Students' expertise already and bringing that to now FirstAlt.
Right.
Can you tell our listeners what to expect when they see FirstAlt hit the ground? Are these going to be First Student employees through and through? Are you contracting? What's that going to look like?
Yeah, it'll be very much like the traditional alternative transportation model. So it'd be contracted drivers in their vehicles. And so most likely, like I mentioned, going out and working with the local transportation companies. What you really do is you approach them and say, hey, we know you already have professional drivers, and they might already be transporting medically fragile people to and from like dialysis appointments. And you tell them, hey, here's the state regulations, here's FirstAlt's regulations, and here's the training you have to go through. And if you're willing to do that, we'd love to utilize those resources for an hour or so in the morning, an hour or so in the afternoon. But you have to meet our standards. And a lot of those service providers or transportation providers, as we call them, really see the value in that opportunity. And then they really start loving what they do. I mean, just no different than a bus driver. Some of these alternative drivers will end up driving the student all through middle school, all through high school. They'll have the same driver every day. And they really get to know their needs just as much as a bus driver. There's cases where they understand, if I play this one song from Elsa, from Frozen, if I play that song,
let it go, baby.
That's right,
let it go.
If they'll play Let It Go on the way to school for the student, it'll calm their nerves and it keeps them, happy the whole way there. They'll start to realize that some other students may need total silence on the ride. And so it's really cool how they kind of form this bond. So even though they're contracted drivers, they're basically running a bus route. They're running the same trip every day, same students, same parents, and they really become part of our transportation kind of family, so to speak.
Okay. And in terms of technology, because we're seeing a lot of these services now bring forward some of that technology that we're seeing on the school bus. Can you share yet anything of what our audience can expect to see from FirstAlt when it comes to routing, seeing the visibility, seeing student tracking?
Right. Yeah, I think that's more important than ever, right? When we didn't have that back in the day, parents, at some point you could track your pizza better than you could track the student on the vehicle, right? And so I think that's important right out of the box. So what was really fun is we took this team, my team, we've worked together for the past decade in alternative transportation. So we were able to sit down from scratch. Everybody's technology really kind of evolved from something else, whether it was ride share, whether it was non-emergency medical, because no one was really doing alternative transportation. So you kind of had this Frankenstein technology that had all these bolt-ons. So what was exciting for us is we were able to sit down and map out from scratch, what type of technology do we need for alternative
transportation?
transportation.
Yeah, so white piece of paper, right? You got to create your own tech to match what you need.
That's why I was kind of mentioning today. It's probably been the most rewarding, year and a half of my career, because we're just like, what do we want to do? How do we want this technology to look? Oh, what about when they get early? There's early outs on Wednesdays and half days on Fridays before spring break. How are we going to account for that? Hey, what if drivers actually had the opportunity to see their schedule in advance? That's a revolutionary idea, right? So all these little things and all these little nuances we're able to build from scratch, and that's what's been really exciting about it. Like, I don't know if this is true, but in my experience, I think this is the first technology ever built specifically for alternative transportation, like from the get-go, not more from some other type of technology.
Interesting. When you kind of pull back the curtain on actually executing, you talked about kind of having the team. I almost said it earlier, right? It takes people.
Yeah.
So you have a team of people. Can you explain kind of what is that team doing that's very different? Because obviously First Students model is a little different than what you're explaining, because my understanding is sometimes there's central dispatch.
That's right.
You're managing the parent relationship, the IEP. It may be McKinney-Vento. There's some very specific use cases for alternative transportation or TNC. So can you explain a little bit kind of what's the secret sauce that kind of makes this so special versus what is already in the market?
Yeah. Well, I think there's two pieces. One is going to be when a customer wants kind of an end-to-end solution. So there's a lot of districts out there who, but just by necessity, are working with a bus company and an alternative company. And so they're having to work with two different billing, two different people to call, two different sets of technology. You can't track all your trips in one location, right? You're just dealing with 2 to 3 different vendors and their different tools. So what really sets this apart for those districts that are looking for an end-to-end solution is you're going to be able to have one technology platform. If you want to see where the bus is, or you want to see where an alternative vehicle is, or you want to see where the white van fleet is, you're going to have access into the entire fleet of vehicles. The other thing that comes with that is you are now going to have a uniform training platform. So again, hey, whether that student's being picked up in a bus or an alternative vehicle, we know they have all had the same training. That's just not the case when you're using 2 different vendors. And the other thing, and I think the most important thing, when you're really using these 2 companies, and we always knew this before, in alternative, you're really not getting the best cost efficient. You're not getting like a transparent view into your whole program. It's because you have one company running your alternative, one company running your bus. And trust me, never once on the alternative side did I say, hey, you know what? You're giving us too many trips. It's not really that efficient. You should give this revenue back to the bus company. And no bus company ever came and threw trips over the wall to us. Well, now you're kind of removing that wall. And you're saying, hey, here's your entire transportation program. We should move some of these onto a bus. We should move some of these into an alternative vehicle. So you really have a view into your whole program and really have both from resources and finances the best efficiencies.
So is First going to be concentrating then first on its existing school bus customers to then roll this out? And the next question would be, would you be interested, or would there be a possibility of branching out further and having some standalone that's maybe with an in-house fleet, and you have the FirstAlt service? Yeah,
that's a great question. Yes, first and foremost, our goal is to help our existing customers with driver shortages or with their alternative transportation needs. And yes, this is also going to be a standalone division in that we can bid on, and we will bid on, and we'll run alternative only contracts for in-house, in-source districts. So it's a little bit of both, right? We can go out and bid on alternative only for districts who that's all they need. And then we can be part of the bus bid now, more of a hybrid bid, and say, hey, not only can we come in and transport your students in these buses, but really just hand us all your students. Let us take a look at this and find the most efficient way for you to transport your students to and from school. And we'll make sure that they have the same training, same technology platform across the board.
And then what was the reaction from the customers when you got to be testing this? Like, hey, what if we launch this? Like, where are those opportunities? Like, what was customer feedback when you were kind of doing your due diligence before you kind of made the decision to push all your chips in on this?
Right. Yeah. What's interesting is in my previous life, we worked with both Durham and First Student on the alternative side, helping them on their driver shortages all the time. So they would reach out to us and say, hey, we have a district here. We can't cover all the trips. So could you handle that? So I had a lot of familiarity working with bus companies and kind of how they ran. But as we went to the customers, they just were kind of like, just kind of the pitch I gave to you, so to speak, of a full transparency into the program and understanding where all of your students are at and understanding, do I have the right mix of buses and alternative vehicles? So they're very excited about this. It's just one, some of these districts have 500-600 vendors that they're managing across the board. And so with regards to transportation, to just be able to make one phone call or talk to one person that can handle all of those needs is going to make a big difference for them. It makes their life a little bit easier. And also I think it's going to save them money and resources at the same time.
So in terms of managing contractors, and I read the release, and you mentioned First Student has the largest school bus fleet in North America. You obviously have such a brain trust there when it comes to maintenance, operations, routing, technology. But it's going to be different, right? For you guys, you're going to be working with subcontractors. Is there going to be a melding of that expertise and sharing going on that you're able to impart a lot of this brain trust to the companies you're contracting with?
Yes, that's actually a great question. I really feel like, we we felt like we knew it all in a sense with alternative transportation. I'm talking about my team. But as we were onboarded and started working with First Student, we were kind of blown away because we really didn't know the bus industry at all. I mean, we knew it from a peripheral, but to come in there and to talk, to see how much they focus on safety, to see how much they focus on training, the mechanics in the bays, they have Gold Star certified mechanics, and to go visit their locations and shops and to realize really how much way more complicated running a bus operation than an alternative, right? We were kind of like, oh man, I'm glad I don't have to do this. This is a lot of heavy lifting. So we have really learned a lot that's helped us on the alternative side from the busing side. And there's a lot of synergies. Some of the synergies we can explore are the maintenance garages. Another thing is that those same drivers, usually the drivers of alternative vehicles, will have a requirement to at least have one mechanical inspection every year. Well, we can bring those drivers now into our mechanics, First Student mechanics, on site. So now you have the same inspection, not only the same training, the same technology, now you have the same kind of quality of inspection that the same drivers are inspecting those buses. And again, like I say, the training is probably the biggest part. I mentioned that First Student runs 1 million trips a day that involves students with special transportation needs. 1 million a day. So it's shocking to me kind of the scale of First Student as I came on board and saw that. And so that's why they really decided, hey, who's more of an expert in this industry than First Student? So they said, let's just develop our own training curriculum from the years and the millions of trips we run. And like I mentioned, they worked with the University of Cincinnati. And then as we looked at that, I'm no kidding. I just remember going, wait, how does the whole world not know about this training? Like, this is what the entire industry is looking for. An alternative you're looking for off the shelf. You're just trying to find anything out there, right? And so I said, hey, can we take this exact training into our alternative fleet? And luckily the answer was yes. And to me, honestly, besides the technology, it's probably the thing I'm the most excited about is that they'll have, hands-on training from the experts in the business. And that's the First Student bus training.
Well, it's so great to have you on the podcast. Can you share, where can someone learn more if they want to find out, get maybe a bid or learn more about the service? Where do they go?
Yeah, you can find us at FirstAlt.com. That website just launched today. So if you get there quick, you could be the first one to log in.
Excellent. We're so glad you're here. We got a massive audience this week at the TSD Conference. So we'll be here all week, guys. We got tons of content coming your way. stnonline.com. Stay up to date on all the stories, all the news we've got coming out from the shows. We got emails firing out. Obviously, we got great podcasts. So make sure and share this podcast with your friends. Get it out there. If you guys care about alternative transportation, you want to learn more, FirstAlt's a great way to kind of dive in and see what the offering is. And we're excited to be here. Ryan, any other big highlights you're looking forward at the show?
I'm just looking forward to more conversations with folks. It's always great connecting with people, checking out our upcoming general sessions and keynotes and breakout sessions. We got the rodeo coming up, evacuation training. The list just goes on and on. So the trade show, of course, can't forget that. So looking forward just to mingling with everybody and learning.
Wonderful. Guys, don't forget also STN Expo this summer. STN Expo Indy is June 2nd through the 6th down at the Indiana Convention Center. And we have STN Expo in Reno, plus our Green Bus Summit. That's going to be July 14th through the 19th, Reno, Nevada. So check that out at stnexpo.com for all the details. Make sure and get this podcast to everybody on your friends. Share it on LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter. We love you guys. We want to make sure you share it and get out to the community. You can check out the podcast on stnpodcast.com, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you listen to Pods Nation. We love you. We'll see you next week.